cells with the same genetic encoding. So the GMO foods could be reproducing themselves inside your body. The genetic makeup over and over again, even after you've stopped eating it. Which, I mean, it's enough to scare me. I want my body in my body. I want food to nourish my body. But I don't want food to, especially not genetically modified food that's not from nature, food that's not supposed to be there. I don't want that food to change the way my body works. I mean, this was derived in a science lab by a couple guys in white coats. This isn't the way the world has evolved. This isn't the way the world works. This isn't nature taking its course. This is some guys playing God with a test tube in a lab, and they are bringing about catastrophic consequences, possibly. I mean, we've already seen that rats grow tumors, have birth defects, false pregnancies, decreased sterility, and other test results have shown increased mortality rates, infant mortality rates. That GMO foods, it goes far worse than what you're taking into your body, but it's what you pass on to the next generation. I mean, this is changing the way your organs function. This gets into the reproductive organs, and that changes the way every future generation you have functions. It has modified everything you create, and then when they grow up, they're going to grow up with that in their system, and whatever they create, the kids they have, and it continues on. But yes, and let's move on to a little bit of the oversight. The oversight here. For one, there's three organizations: the FDA, the Food Drug Administration, the USDA, and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And these three agencies pretty much oversee everything that we take into our body, food-wise. And the EPA deals with pesticides, the FDA deals with most foods, and the USDA deals with poultry, meats, and I believe eggs. And it's been a big game of passing the buck. When genetically modified foods were coming about, there was actually the way that this was done in pertaining to genetically modified organisms, they came out in 1992 and defined genetically modified foods kind of under all one umbrella. They said that we've been genetically modifying foods for so long that these new genetically modified foods, we're going to incorporate them in with the old ones. And when they say that we've been genetically modifying foods, they're talking about breeding and gene selection. They're talking about natural, not necessarily modifying. You're not genetically modifying anything when you do selective breeding. You're just that. You're selecting what you want to keep, and you're breeding only those. Pretty much what nature does all over the world. What survives the harsher winters reproduces. And now, stuff that can survive harsher winters is the dominant gene, and it has eliminated the stuff that the gene that died out in harsh winters. And that's just natural selection in a sense. Same way if you have a garden or a farm and you see lemons. You have lemons or an orange grove. Now, if you have a bunch of orange trees that are coming up ripe and healthy, and then you have some orange trees that are coming up weak and stimbly, and the oranges may come out looking deformed, or they might come out rotten, or maybe they're off-colored. Those trees you're going to try to cut those trees down and not allow those trees to reproduce with the other trees. That's selective breeding. The FDA defined that as genetically modified foods, for the purpose of being able to put new genetically modified foods, foods that are actually modified at a molecular and genetic level, and then that drug or that protein or that DNA and RNA is injected into our food by science, not by nature, the same as selective breeding. So now that they've classified that under the same umbrella, they've said that we've been doing it for so long, it's presumed safe. They even mentioned they even mentioned that Europe defines it differently. Europe defines selective breeding differently than genetically modified organisms, but they don't, because they're just not going to go that way, apparently. And then it became a big game from there of passing the buck. A lot of breakdown, essentially, that the EPA is in charge of monitoring pesticides and herbicides that are used on our food. Well, a big thing with genetically modified crops is they're injecting proteins that make it resistant to pesticides. So what we're dealing with here when we're creating these genetically modified organisms is a plant that sustains itself even after being sprayed down with pesticides. So we're kind of looking like we're going to pass it to the EPA. Then the FDA stated that not only were these assumed safe because they've, genetically modifying foods has been going on for forever through selective breedings. It's got to be safe. They used the substantially equivalent argument that as long as it was the same of its counterpart, it was assumed safe. That the EPA was overseeing the herbicides and the pesticides. That's their responsibility. And that they mentioned the FDA, if they had, a reason to suspect it was dangerous, could pull it from the shelf. But that's after it's too late, and that's if they suspect it's dangerous. They'd have to do some research or testing. They also, because it's assumed so safe, they left any testing up to the corporations or companies themselves. They later, I believe it was 4 years later in '96, came out with the volunteer program where companies that wanted their food tested could essentially volunteer to have it tested by the FDA. But what we're getting at here, what we're saying is that there's no real oversight. There's no real oversight from a government agency, aside from going through a lab and saying that, the chemical makeup of this protein is similar to this protein. They must be safe. When has that ever been enough? When have we ever looked at anything and said, well, my toothbrush is blue, this toothbrush is blue, they're the same? Do we not care that the second blue toothbrush might be made using lead-based paint in China? Does it just have to be of similar makeup or look the same to... Sorry about that. Does it have to be just similar makeup or look the same to be defined as the same? Can we not go a little bit further? I don't know. See what happens to these rats past the 90-day point? Is that too expensive? Is that taking too much time? Because I hate paying taxes for a lot of the bullshit that we're paying taxes for, but if I was paying taxes to see if my food was safe, rather than fund unconstitutional, illegal wars around the world and run detention centers where we're just locking up innocent people. If we were using taxes to find out if our food was safe, if the taxes had been for that, shit. Yes, please. more than happy to pay taxes for stuff like that. But that's not the case here. We're saying testing is optional. It's assumed safe. That, we don't expect any health risks. But aside from that, I mean, we're launching on a global scale of genetic contamination, and I was talking about this earlier. I said I'd come back into it deeper, with the farmers. But the farmers, and this is the authorized genetically modified foods thing. The authorized bit of it is the companies come up, the biotech industries come up with these genetically modified foods, and they make the seed. Now, they then sell the seed to the farmers and the right to use that seed for that year. Should the farmers save seed for next year, it's unauthorized. Should the farmers, not have bought their seed, but some of the genetically modified material ends up in their crops, it's not authorized. And then the corporation, Monsanto, will come in, take the, they've actually done this several times, that because of, the air spreads pollen, and pollination season, but if your land becomes contaminated with genetically modified organisms, against your wishes or not, you as a farmer have food coming up that is contaminated. You didn't want it, so to you it's a contamination, it's a disease. But should your food be contaminated with genetically modified organisms, with the chemical, the protein developed by Monsanto, they will take your crops for that year, take your profits for that year. They will sue you, and I mean, if you're a small-time farmer, you're out of business. You're done. That's it. And not only is that it, but because a lot of these farmers are using selective breeding, they've been working on these seeds that they use, sometimes for generations. One farmer was working on his seed for 50 years, and he, had corn. He perfected it the way he wanted it. It tasted the way he wanted it. It had the genetic makeup that he wanted it to have. But his entire life's work was ruined by genetically modified corn or crops, because it influenced his land, altered, his crops. So now his seed that he's been working on for 50 years is gone. He cannot get that back. But not only that, but he's now being sued and having his crops taken because, against his wishes, his land was contaminated. But that's the authorized aspect of it. So not only are we bullying farmers into buying the seed, because if they don't buy our seed and they get contaminated anyways, we sue them, but it's spreading by nature. The wind is spreading it in pollination season, during pollination season, and it will continue to spread. I mean, that's not something we can stop. Flowers have always grown, crops have always grown naturally, pollinate themselves naturally, they make seeds naturally. That's, it's in the air, it's in the wind, bees carry it. We learned about it in school. It's not something you can just put up a big fence around your farm and let all the GMOs stop there. It's not something that can be done. And then also, we're eliminating genetic diversity. Just like, the man who had 50 years worth of seed that he developed his way. We're eliminating that. We're going to get to a point in the future, if this continues, where all the crops are the same, where everybody's using these GM crops. And this is a huge, huge problem. Genetic diversity is needed in any instance. In animals, in humans, and in plants. It stops diseases, and it's a big part of that. Because genetically targeted diseases, diseases that go after certain genes. If you have a population, if you have a disease come along that goes after GM corn, and all of the world's corn is GM corn, it's going to spread rampantly and wipe out. You're going to lose a lot of your corn. We saw this in actually just as recently as 1970, when maize crop in southern U.S. was attacked by a disease called southern corn leaf blight. And because of the uniformity among the maize in the U.S., we lost 15% of our total harvest, which was $1 billion worth in 1970. In 1970, $1 billion. Only imagine what that would be worth today. And 15% of our harvest, if we have everything is GM crops, we could lose 100% of our harvest. We could actually starve because of a small disease that might come along, because we lack genetic diversity. So I mean, the GM crops are prone to side effects. They're killing animals, causing skin diseases, respiratory problems, lowering sterility rates, increasing birth defects, increasing false pregnancies. I mean, increasing tumor sizes, the frequency of occurrences of tumors. They're increasing death rates. I mean, this is nothing more than a poison. And just like a lot of foods we have, like color dyes and bleaches, for our pastas, and a lot of the shit that we put in our food, arsenic, which is illegal in other places around the world because of how poisonous it is. This is a fine example, one, of how big business trumps any kind of common sense in America. Two, how big business trumps safety in America. And three, this is a perfect tool that the New World Order can use to downsize our population. We all know the New World Order has an agenda of downsizing our population. We all know that one of their main concerns is our currently overpopulated state. One of their main concerns is our threat of growing our population even more. And this seems like a perfect answer to it. I can't think of another reason that a big corporation like Monsanto, with the backing of the elite and our government, would allow such a poisonous food to be pushed on us. Wait a minute. They said GM Foods was to help solve the hunger problem. That they were going to increase the amount of food we got. More plentiful harvests. That we were going to solve world hunger. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the point of putting all this poison down our throat. So that there's enough poison to feed the entire world. Let's take a look at that. Oh, weirdly enough, I just found out that more people are dying of hunger now than there was 20 years ago. Not only that, but most people who die of hunger live in countries who have a food surplus rather than a deficit. And this is because agriculture is done on a world scale. It's an industry, and it's a worldwide industry. Argentina, for example, is the world's second largest producer of genetically engineered crops. And they export a lot of those crops. Yes, they export millions of tons of genetically engineered soy every year from Argentina for cattle feed, and still millions of Argentinians go hungry. Now this is because the countries that have the food surplus, they're putting it out into the world market. They're not putting it locally. This is a business. This poison is a business. We're creating this poison. It's killing people. And One, genetically modified crops don't. Let's not get our facts twisted here. They don't increase. They do not increase the yield of crops. You don't get more corn per acre. You don't get more corn per stalk. You don't get more food. You just get genetically modified food. You get the same amount of food as healthy food would give you, but it's pumped full of poison. It's an industry. And if it's an industry to kill us, or if it's just an industry to make pesticide spraying over their crops easier and more convenient for them, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that it's not producing more food, so it's not going to solve world hunger. It is poisoning us, so it is going to increase our cancer rates, our birth defect rates, decrease our sterility rates, which have already fallen 60%. I mean, we used to have an average healthy men between the ages of 18 and 25 used to have an average of, per milliliter, 110 million units of sperm. Now, we have 60. I mean, and actually that statistic is still several years old. Who knows? We could be down to 40 or 20 or 10 by now. The point being, our sterility rate is dropping. Cancer rates are on the rise. So is GMO foods. So are the study results that show these two are linked. And yet big business and Americans, big business doesn't want to do anything about this, and Americans don't know about this. Americans also have a terrible, terrible safety on the shelf perspective. If you think it's on the it's on the shelf, it is proof of it being safe, then you are sadly mistaken. We've known. If you've ever been sitting around with your friends and your friend is saying, you know that fig sweetener could give you cancer, you know that that food is going to give you cancer, you know that artificial shit's going to give you cancer, and yeah, one thing or another will. It's not by accident. And if it is by accident, it's allowed to continue, not by accident. You know, you and your friends at the dinner table are not the only scientists in the world that know this stuff is poisonous. Big America knows this stuff is poisonous too. They just don't give a fuck. It's time we did. But that is what I got for genetically modified foods. Very poisonous, very deadly. Stay away if you can. Me myself, I'm starting a garden actually in the yard. So hopefully next year I can be entirely GMO free, all homegrown organic. You know, I live in Germany, luckily. So I currently have the ability to go to the German markets, which has outlawed the import of GM maize since 2009, I believe. Either way, I don't have to worry about GMO foods in my local market, which is really nice. It's really nice to be able to go to the store and not freak out whenever you see something that you want to eat, because you used to enjoy eating that, which, going to an American store, I do. But that's all I have on GMO foods. You know, please subscribe, like the video, share, get the word out. We got future updates coming. I try to do at least one video a week, hit on other things that come up noteworthy in the news. Probably do a couple more short videos on different topics this weekend. And that's it with this weekly nightly news. Have a good lifestyle.